The brands do this themselves. It is so bad. You do not need to go to business school to become a founder. What is the unique insight that you have as a founder, and why are you building that business?
I'm super excited for this one, Kait of Brij, and let's get into it. I'd love to just always start by setting a little bit of context and then zooming out into industry and foundership. So just to set that context, what's the 5 to 15 sentence version of what Brij is today?
Brij is a bridge between the offline and online for omnichannel brands. So when a brand sells through retail, they lose the customer. We help them collect that data.
Which, when I first was looking through the landing page and kind of getting my bearings around it, the thing that I find most interesting is like, you're not just doing omnichannel in the same sense of other e-commerce products doing omnichannel. It feels like you're also targeting stuff that has an omnichannel dynamic to it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but there are other omnichannel products that'll help you say, okay, match your retail and your e-commerce presence. You're saying there's stuff like rebates and sweepstakes and QR codes and things that have more of this, again, online, offline dynamic to them. Is that true? Are you targeting specifically certain moments inside being omnichannel?
Yeah. So, I think a couple things to think about. The e-commerce landscape has a ton of SaaS tools. There are, 20 different tools to optimize your conversion rate on your site. E-commerce is about 10% of the multi-trillion-dollar retail industry. It has grown dramatically because of COVID, but the reality is the way consumers shop across all of your products is omnichannel. You shop in Amazon, online, in store, in Target, in a grocery store. And those are all these different touch points that happen both online and offline. And so we are creating a platform that gives brands different tools to collect these touch points across those platforms and have a single source of truth. So that's where the bridge comes in between the offline and the online. So a sweepstakes is an example of a tool that a brand can use to give a value transfer to. So enter into this sweepstakes to meet Emma Chamberlain. And so I'm giving my email to do that. The brand, Chamberlain Coffee now has that email. But there's, we're collecting the receipt from the purchase in store. So that becomes one tool of this broader, I would say, omni-channel and data insights platform that we've built.
So the tool is almost like a way to behaviorally get the consumer to give
exactly
omnichannel data. That's really interesting because it's not just an attribution product that goes, we're going to try to match data. We're also going to try to get the user to do things that'll make data matching more easy.
That is exactly right.
That's super interesting. How did you, I usually don't just go, let's talk about the origin story this fast, but because we're in this moment, let's do it anyway. Like, that feels to me unobvious and super interesting as if someone was going to go, I've been in e-commerce for 20 years and I have an omnichannel idea. It feels like this is not what they would come up with. This feels like it came from some novel insight that getting consumers to do things like a sweepstakes or a rebate or things like this. A lot about your business is becoming clear in my head. What was the moment though of the origin of the ideation?
So I started my career on the investing side, and I was investing in omnichannel, future of retail, on kind of the private equity side. So that was, I've been really thinking about this offline to online world for a really long time. Actually started in the mall space. What is the future of in-store retail? I thought that the personalized e-commerce experience was amazing, but just felt that was completely disintermediated from, the offline space. Ended up going back to business school, and I was iterating around this idea. It was I'd have these moments where I knew that this is what I wanted to build in, but I didn't know what the idea was. And then I remember talking to, I was doing customer discovery, talking to brands. I remember talking to a friend who worked at Stuart Weitzman, and she was like, oh, when we sell through wholesale, there is zero data about the customer. She's like, maybe on a quarterly basis, we're getting sell-through reports, i.e. how much product they sell. And they're like, the retailers are literally flashing us a report. We see it once a quarter, if that, zero data on that end customer. So this is this this was kind of the start of, oh my gosh, there is this multi-trillion-dollar, and it's just kind of been the way things have been.
Well, actually, two questions about that.
Yeah.
I could imagine that well, let me ask both of them as word vomit. The retailers themselves, could decide we also don't want our merchants, our vendors, whatever we're calling these brands, to have the data. They're like, okay, this is our data. If I'm Target, I want to know about the customer and I want to sell them your product. But part of the reason I get to keep my margins is I keep their data away from you and I sell it to you as a method of saying I want my margins later on in whatever deal we make. You need me to get to the consumer as Target. I'm not giving you the data. So that's like a thing I'll put out. I want to get your reaction to that. But then another component of that too is it's true for brands, like is Brij as useful for brands that own their retail? Say an Allbirds that has their retail location, they're going to have their own data obviously in that moment. And so they still have attribution, things they probably want to figure out omnichannel. But do you think of yourself as more targeted at brands that are selling through other retailers?
Yes. So Allbirds is not our ideal customer ICP. I would say our ideal customer is, large presence through unowned retail. And, to your point and question earlier about retailers wanting to own that data, this actually has been, I think a long-lasting, it's definitely something that I sell against, that like one steals from the other. But I actually think that this is fundamentally wrong. And this is actually core to what we've built at Brij. And, I speak to so many brands every single day. They need to tell retailers where on shelf they should be, who their customer is, how they're going to be most successful. Target has hundreds of thousands of brands that, they have a ton of data on, but they can't, be the advocate for every brand. The brand needs to be the advocate for themselves. And so what we know and what we believe is that more data at the brand is better for the consumer, better for the brand, and better for the retailer. And we're actually starting to see some of our brands pitch us to retailers and say, hey, we have this platform. We are going to jointly collect data, actually even, clear our email flows with you because you, Target, do great things, or other retailers, like all the grocery stores. You do a great thing here, but we're the more digitally native brand that knows our customer, knows our product, and we want to drive sell-through in retail, but we can only do that if we can talk to the customer. And so what we're seeing is brands are starting to use Brij, and it's not about we're doing this in a sneaky way. It's, hey, we're going to help your customer. And there's different ways. I use the Sweepstakes example. So it's we're going to use our digital channel. We have these incredible, influencers platform to support that. They have to purchase in store. So it becomes this joint effort. But I think one of the things that we are debunking is one steals from the other. And what we prefer to think about is that you as a brand need to be wherever your customer wants to shop. And so how we can empower you to do that and to inform them that you're launching a new product in retail. And so go to those retailers. And so you're using all of your channels to do so.
Well, it feels like you're also, at this perfect moment where whether it's influencers or whether it's just the proliferation of new consumer brands, the idea of the brand building that deeper relationship with the customer, and it being a moment where maybe we're doing more CPG and other things like it than before, where, if I was maybe thinking 5 to 10 years ago, our best influencers are probably trying to sell us something online, maybe a subscription, maybe something content related. But now a lot of folks who have attention are going, let me create something in food and beverage. Let me create something that is going to require the physical presence. Two things that come out of that for me. One, I'm curious, let's stick maybe in this for a second. I did notice that a lot of your showcase customers you have Charli D'Amelio, Emma Chamberlain, Jake Paul, all these folks. How key is that portion of it? Because now that you're talking a lot about this, the ability to drive attention and drive certain consumer behavior, do the sweepstakes, do the rebate, do this or that. Again, it becomes core to your product, and they obviously have ability maybe to get their fans to do things more than a normal brand.
It's a really good question. One of our keynote customers is Feastables, which is MrBeast. So he's the largest creator in the world. And, literally they are the customer that broke our platform because of their scale. And so their ability to kind of drive attention through our platform is unbelievable. And so, they do. So vast majority of their traffic is through through retail. They're, grocery, Walmart, et cetera. They have a QR code that we power on the product that they're using all their digital channels. They're constantly changing. They're running new sweepstakes, et cetera. So we've definitely seen really powerful product market fit in that sector. However, doesn't need to be the case. And I would say different categories utilize our platform differently. And so that is certainly a really good use case for us. And we're really seeing, across the space, like the emergence of creator-backed brand because they have that audience. We also have incredible product market fit in what I would call hard goods. So where we think about where our platform is best utilized, it's like when you have that pain point, i.e. like large unowned channels. But then the other is like, what is the product and what is the product and or brand, and is there a way that you can creatively give a value transfer to the consumer? So going to the hard goods, we work with brands like Skullcandy and Gosney, which is an outdoor pizza oven. And what we're powering for them is product and warranty registration. So this is actually the original idea. Like, because there's a pre-existing consumer behavior to register a warranty. Not everyone does it, but a lot of people do.
I'm terrible at it.
And honestly, like what we are competing against, the brands do this themselves. It is so bad. It is like,
it's the pamphlet that's somewhere in all the
pamphlet. I mean, and that's literally what I had in my first kind of pitch. It was like this, you fill out the warranty. It is so bad.
And if there was a vendor, I'm assuming like the online experience of like registering something that had a QR code was awful.
Exactly. No, it's this form that you had to fill out 20. And so the conversion rate is horrible.
Right.
I mean, so much so, we just got some data back from this brand Homedics that we launched. In 5 weeks, we collected the same amount of data that did an entire year.
Jeez.
So that is how much we're increasing that conversion.
Well, and it feels very obvious to me, I'm going to say it and I'm assuming you're going to tell me I'm right, like they want warranties filled out. This is not like a gym membership. I mean, I'm going to assume some bad brands maybe don't because truly their product is bad, but a brand that wants to connect with their customer that's doing a decent enough job prefers that you have an experience where you don't have a negative breakage of a product, where you can utilize the warranty, especially they're probably paying some, fee already for it baked into the price of the product. And so like the ability to have consumers actually adopt product registration more broadly is not just good for the brand and the consumer, but the relationship between the two. So the idea of like actually getting people to fill this out, and maybe that means there's X% more repair required or customer interaction, but that's preferred over whatever negative interaction might have happened instead?
It's exactly right. And the brands that we want to work with are going to stand behind their product anyway.
Right.
If a brand's like, oh, we don't want people to register their warranty, we don't want to work with you because that's not the right customer for us. We are like thinking about how we deepen that customer relationship. And, part of Brij is there's the data collection. That is why brands buy from us. But we have this whole experiential element to the mobile experiences that you can build with Brij that support that customer experience. So customer success is actually a key advocate for our buyer because we're including, setup guides and basically guiding that consumer journey. Often what a brand is saying, when they're introduced to Brij, it's like, okay, we're launching this big retailer. How do we continue to give our customers a better experience? How do we support them? How do we educate them? So any sort of high education product, like those are all really good fits for us because when you're selling D2C, you have the ability to send all those meta ads and educate the customer on, what that product is. And then, post-purchase email and text flows, tell them how to use the product successfully. When that customer discovers your product in retail, you don't have that ability.
Well, just to make it explicit, you're saying that because you don't have the ability to email them, basically.
You don't have the ability to email them.
It all comes back to the email.
Even if you don't get the email, you just give them a guided post-purchase experience. Like, here's how you set up your, Black Diamond, like ski poles. So like highly technical products, like that's a really good fit for us.
Before we kind of move to other portions of this, I just want to ask about the influencer side. So you've successfully gotten great brands who are creator-led. Feels like a lot of people in the startup land who are starting things in that space would love a tip or three. How did you wind up being so successful amongst these brands?
like, how did I get to them?
Yeah.
Or so,
and maybe how did you get to them, and what's required to win them over? Because again, if you go to your landing page, you have pretty much every like Gen Z dream influencers brand is on there.
We got Feastables was one of our first ones, and so like I said, they were the one that broke our product. But I think
did that have to do with the fact that whether it was Jimmy's team, or I don't know if Night Media was still involved back then. Like, were they just looking for this? Because he's experimental, right? So like testing and being able to get an email feels relevant. Was it almost like the perfect customer vendor match?
Yes. So yes, in that perfect customer vendor match, we also had a really amazing product. So we, did not invent the QR code. The QR code is not like what is powerful about our software. It's what's behind that. It's the ability to build these experiences, to seamlessly collect data, to change that content, to integrate it with the tech stack. And so we had that product built already. And then, met some of the Feastables team. They were like, wow, we're doing this in like a very hacky way. Because there is not a good competitor to us. Like, we are definitively the best in class product. And basically the Feastables team ended up getting multiple recommendations that they should check out Brij. We gave them a demo, and they were like, okay, wow. And now actually the person who bought us at Feastables is a close friend. She's, since moved on from Feastables, but like is the biggest advocate. She's brought us, a ton of our customers.
For you, did that first anchor customer just wind up opening those doors?
Yes. Yeah. So, what we've found is that brands care about other brands in their very explicit category. Right. So we, our go-to-market strategy has very much been find an excellent brand, best-in-class brand in a category, and then go down to, we got Feastables, and then we went to all the creator-backed brands. We've done very similar things in we do a ton in baby. For a couple of reasons. One, I'm a mom, so I just those are products I experience, and I'm like, this could use Brij. Mm-hmm. And so, we work with brands like Lalo and Newton Baby. And so, I remember Newton Baby was like, oh, you work with Lalo, we're interested. This is exactly what we're looking for. And so baby hard goods are a highly registerable product, so that's a great fit.
Right.
We've also done a ton in beverage. So, we have Health Aid. And so it's then we go down to, all these other beverage brands. Alcohol, because, we work with Sapporo. So, alcohol 3-tier system, no data, often using these existing tools, rebates and sweepstakes. But I think horribly. Yes. They're either super transactional with no branded experiential customer element, or they're just so disintermediated that you're hacking so many things together. So conversion is low, data collection is low, and the team doing it is taking a lot of time. And so we're bringing all these tools together in a platform. And so something that I've seen is that I'm usually selling in with one main use case, but then people are excited about the whole platform. So, Skullcandy is a deal we closed pretty recently that I'm pretty proud of, just because I love the buyer. She's now become a friend throughout the process. And I think that they're such a cool brand that is, modernizing their tech stack. They bought for product registration, but they're we're doing an end cap at Walmart. We're super excited. We should do a sweepstakes instead of just, and so they buy in with one, this is the hero use case you're buying for, but then they'll use us across their whole platform.
It feels obvious to me as to why they don't build it themselves. These teams are not equipped to build the digital experiential layer that you're building for them. It doesn't feel obvious to me as to why the legacy players in this space, I don't even know who they are, but why no one else has done a good job of staying competitive, serving these use cases, competing with you, and I'm sure that'll eventually happen if it's not already. Is it this feels sticky to them, or
is the question is why does this not exist already?
Yeah, and why do if legacy players are existing and important, why have they not modernized with their customer?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think that there's a couple of dynamics. One is there are legacy players. And I'll just put a pin in that, because I think that that's a piece that to be brought into the consideration set. Why this exists, and I think why this is becoming such a powerful tool, I think is this state of the market that we're in, where we're really seeing the belief and the convergence of brands. And I think that this was heavily, and when I say convergence of driven by the pandemic. So just kind of backing up. When we started this business, it was 2020, start of the pandemic. A couple of things are happening. One, QR code adoption skyrocketed. As everyone knows, because we had to. And so that became a new consumer behavior that before was like, okay, some people knew how to scan a QR code, but like now it's ubiquitous. There's no longer a question. Does someone know how to scan one? Like, will someone use it? So that became an opportunity, a new consumer behavior driven by the pandemic that created the ability to have a website. A QR code is a website that you use in the offline space. And so that's like new consumer behavior. The second was really, what COVID and what the pandemic did for brands and e-commerce. So as well as, the cost to acquire customers. So your retail-only brands that never had a direct presence set one up in the pandemic because they had to. And so
people don't realize how big of a trend that was. It was really a 0 to 1 that we forget because so many brands were inaccessible that way.
Exactly. And so that became this like retail brands came online, now care about having data and now know what to do with it. So there's this whole cohort of brands that are looking to build their direct presence and need more tools to do that because they have these, existing retail relationships, but they also want to build their direct presence. And Skullcandy is a very good example of that. Then there is your digitally native brands that, the D2C playbook does not work anymore, or the pure play D2C playbook. What the Allbirds of the world were able to do. There was a point in time where there was meta arbitrage. And now the cost to acquire customers, unless you have an unbelievable subscription business or unbelievable LTV business, so like apparel does very well or can scale longer as a digitally native business because there's so many different, lines you can drop over and over again. So going to wholesale becomes less important. But for most other categories, there's like a scale at which like you're then selling on Amazon, you're then moving into wholesale, and that's where you're going to scale your brand. And so that convergence of brands has created this, opportunity where brands need to be omnichannel. They need to have a unified view of their customer, but there's really no modern tools to do that. So there's these archaic tools that in each category, there are tools that do just rebates. There are tools that do just sweepstakes. There are tools that do just product registration. But I think like what's powerful about what we've built is it's like we're doing all of those things.
It's almost like all those vendors just got caught in the middle of that transition. It was too, for them to change their product in that moment just would have been almost too much.
Yeah. So, and we built as a platform from the beginning. So I think that it took us longer to see product market fit than maybe one, we call it a point solution. But like now that we have it, it's so clear that we have it actually in multiple different categories. And it, it continues to be like, we learn from one thing, like the facilitation of a sweepstakes, like there are, from a software perspective, is very similar. From the consumer experience perspective, is very similar, even though you use words differently than register my warranty.
Right. Let's zoom out to you. So you said you're in private equity first. Not that common, surprisingly, in venture-backed startup land for founders to be PE experienced. What's interesting about your brain? How is your brain maybe wired differently? I'm going to editorialize and say it's super interesting that you're PE backed in this moment where basically like all of Ventureland has shifted to being very focused on fundamentals and caring about unit economics and caring about financials. So that feels obvious. What's unobvious about how your brain is maybe wired differently than the Stanford grad who comes and raises a $15 million round right out of college for their AI SaaS app?
Well,
not to counterposition things, but
what I would say is that we've probably had far more revenue than that Stanford grad, and the probably more conservative way that we've started to grow our business. I think. There's a couple of different things. I think something that like private equity or that type of upbringing is just like grassroots, like you just get good business skills. You're everything, like, how to talk to investors, how their mind thinks, what are some of those different metrics that are ultimately going to be important, not just growth. So I would say beyond just growth, like what should we be thinking about from the beginning? So I think that that's probably a metric. I also think that as an investor, you're zooming out and looking at relative value.
Right.
And so I think that I think that as I thought about what I wanted to build in this category, I had a pretty clear view on what I thought would, if I was going to take that, 10-year jump or whatever that it is to build a business, where I wanted to kind of take that relative risk. I want to zoom in on
this because I feel like a lot of people in tech don't understand this about their investors and their investors, their LPs, which is your relative value point is people who have money, whoever they are not just making a decision as to whether they're excited about you. It's you relative to their other opportunities in the market.
Yep.
And so you being from that financial services space, understanding that you as a founder are then maybe more discreetly going, is my opportunity the right mountain to climb?
Yep.
And not just for me as a founder, but for if I'm going to be venture backed, for others to put capital into my business. And is this a relatively good opportunity relative to my competitors, relative to other opportunities?
Yeah. And so that, it was we think a lot about what is our opportunity cost.
Yeah.
And when I say we, it's my co-founder and I. So we met at Harvard Business School. And so we think always about what is the best use of our time, and that becomes an important piece of when you're building and what you're jumping into. But having that kind of backdrop of as an investor, I think what I liked about investing is that you see so many different things. But I never felt like an expert. And I've actually written and spoken about this before. I think that I am a far better founder and operator than I am an investor. And in my opinion, not that I'm a bad investor, I think that, a lot of people, or at least I went into investing because it was all right, smart people do this, and I'm driven, and these are incredible companies to work for, and it's a great training. But what I enjoyed doing every single day was typically not my day job. I was tinkering on this innovation prize, or building a nonprofit outside of my day job, and so the building piece was always more interesting to me. And so the key layer I think that is different, or what makes me a better founder than investor, is that I am inherently optimistic. Which is more aligned to what you need to be in venture. In venture, I think you need to say why will they win? In PE, you need to think about why are they not going to win?
Yeah.
What are all the assumptions that are not going to work out? And so I really did not like that. I wanted to be oh no, this company, this business is going to to crush it. But my job was to haircut and all the things that weren't going to work out, and having lived through cycles and, the pandemic now, I actually see why things can completely go to shit. But I didn't that was not fun for me to underwrite. I would much rather, underwrite or put behind why is this going to work? So anyway, that backdrop probably gives me a little bit more.
I want to tell you, I actually think venture is that way too. So, we do the feedback loop where I sit with a venture investor, and every time I'll introduce myself as a founder, and I say an occasional angel investor. And people are why don't you, you're doing the feedback loop every week, you meet startups all the time, why don't you raise a fund? And I go, I would actually be, if I write more checks than I do, which they're very small and they're very sporadic, I would be a bad investor because I will, in my head, optimistically build the version of your business all the time. And it sounds like I really like this notion of the optimists actually, they're obviously optimists in venture, but even in venture, they won't necessarily do well because of their ability to kind of construct a future and a set of possibilities, even for a potentially bad pitch or a bad potential concept. I think this notion of getting the reps still of your brain still had to try to do that to the opportunities you were seeing as an investor, then still gives you the muscle to do it while you build, but you still recognize, okay, I don't love to do this all the time.
Totally.
But the muscle is so valuable.
Absolutely. And I also occasional angel invest small checks, because it's like, as a founder, it's hard not to sometimes because you see so much deal flow just inherently in talking to other founders. And, I think I'm investing in people.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, okay, you're awesome. And, you're in my, and I'm not in, like, I want to be part of your journey.
Right.
And so I'm also investing, but very small checks.
Yeah. I'm curious, a lot of people I think will be interested to hear the decision to go to HBS. It sounds like that was, maybe either while you were an investor, maybe right after. But a lot of folks who are either in financial services or in consulting, or maybe they're in tech, but in big tech, who have this moment of maybe thinking they might be a good founder, an early stage operator. Should they go to business school? Should they do it at all? Is it a worthy pursuit to become a founder? What was, let's zoom into some of what your thinking was at the time when you made that choice to go to HBS, and whether or not you were explicitly trying to become a founder. I know you had another startup as well, I saw, before this one. And let's separate, I want to hear your story there, but then also let's hear maybe some of your advice in hindsight for people who are going through the same moment.
Okay, so as I was investing, I remember having this distinct moment where I was closed a really big deal, and I was just like, I don't want to do this. But simultaneously, I knew that I had an itch to be a founder. I told you I was thinking about this offline to online space. I remember having these moments where I'd have extreme excitement, but still didn't feel like the idea was big enough, to the point about being pretty calculated about how I, and when and where I was making that risk. And so for me, business school was a way to, I went and I was like, I'm going to be a founder, or at least I am going to test it in every single way I can while at school. And what felt hard to me about doing that outside of school was that there's a golden handcuffs of, you have this really great salary. And so I joke, I went to business school, so I had negative income. And so whatever income I had as a founder, it was going to be incrementally better. And so that was my own way of getting over the fear of, I would say ultimately, of failure. And was this the right opportunity cost of my time? So that's what—
Big forcing function.
That was a forcing function. And then, while I was at school, I really put blinders on everything else and all the other opportunities there could be, because it is very much a distracting environment in that way. And I was like, I'm going to explore being a founder. I'm going to figure out what idea that's going to be. Would love to meet a co-founder. I'm going to learn as much about this space, because I was really in this private equity space. So I was not in the VC space either. So I had to figure out, they're related, but they're different. So I had to build that network. I had to build that muscle. And that's what I did while I was at school. I ended up meeting my co-founder at a startup boot camp. I pitched an idea and we started working together on that. Realized that we worked incredibly well together. And so that was where it came out of, but I was very intentional about it. So I guess stepping back, my advice is, you do not need to go to business school to become a founder. If you are in any of, consulting, etc. It is a very incredible place to take the time to explore in what feels a pretty safe environment. So that's what worked for me. And, I could not recommend it more. But if you have an idea and you're already building out that network, you can do that directly. You do not need to go to business school to do that. About a third of or what feels at least my class, and we graduated in COVID. So I think the opportunity cost of other jobs. So there's a higher proportion of founders out of my class. It feels like a third, but it's probably a third of my friend group, because my friend group is very founder centric, are founders.
Right.
And so, but we were all pretty intentional about that at school.
Just thinking from the perspective of customer, targeting PE-backed brands or the influencer brands, what else do you think changes about your customer and, kind of what you want? The retail thing obviously is a huge portion of it, and brands and influencers realizing that retail is a huge opportunity. But what else is changing about your customer right now?
So in general, the customer needs to be more profitable. So I think like across the board, that like scale at all costs, like through Meta, it isn't working. So again, like if we were some sort of like Meta optimization tool or something, I would be scared about that because that is not like the key growth lever. When I talk to brands, they're like, retail is our focus for 2025. So what else is they are focused on this environment where there are not great tools that Brij fits into. So that's what's great for us. But the other piece is that they're focused more on profitability. So our ability to show ROI and show that value is really important. And it's not growth at all costs, but again, I think a lot of the growth at all costs was really happening in the e-commerce space.
Yeah.
And so that really has, benefited us. It's like, okay, they're not bringing on new e-commerce tools, but they need tools to support their retail expansion.
Right.
And that's really where we fit.
Right. Zooming out again, just talking about building a team to execute on this. What have you learned over the past few years in building a startup?
From a team perspective, so much. I love building culture. All right, so a couple of things. Like from the beginning, I think having very, very clear team values is so critically important. And not in a woo-woo way, which is like what I initially thought that could potentially be. But what I've found is like there's a very clear person who is a great person at a startup. We would call that be an entrepreneur. That's our core value. But what that means is it's a doer. It's a problem solver. It's someone that like wants to have their hands in everything. And so what having clear values has allowed us to do is articulate who is going to be the right person at Brij. And I think that I've hired people who work and don't, and it's very clear that if they don't have that clear like executor mentality, that they're not going to be a good fit.
Have you figured out a way to figure that out in the interview process?
Gosh.
Asking this selfishly.
Yeah. We try to ask situational questions. And I think that like the way someone even approaches an interview, like if they're coming by having done, like we always have some sort of case study or like we are giving them a real problem that they would work on because there are so many in a startup. And so seeing their ability to execute literally in real time, I think is probably the best way. References has also been like another key component. And I would say like I've been building in public for the past kind of year and change on LinkedIn, which has really created more of an inbound talent pool for us. And so when we post jobs, I literally like do not speak to a candidate unless they have some sort of warm introduction to me. And that to me is an indication that they're willing to do the work to get the introduction. So that is an indication of like them being a doer. So those are kind of, little examples. I've also seen that like as your business scales, you need different people, different types of people. And so that's kind of been like something else that we've, continued to evolve. But there's, so much to say about, hiring and firing and, I've made bad hires and I've gotten way better at firing fast. And, I'm still getting better at hiring. That continues to be something that is so critically important. As hiring the right people is what can like truly propel your business. But like hiring the right people that have those values at the right time is, also really important.
Yeah. It's tough across the board. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'll go to the crowd, so prepare yourselves. When you think about all the things that you're seeing across these brands, it gives you a really interesting lens, just like when you were an investor, in terms of a lot of different behavior in retail and e-commerce and the creator brand world. What do you think is an interesting thing, trend, opportunity that you're seeing, not off of just what you're doing, but off of all the customers that you serve for, I think at the cutting edge of commerce in general? What's something that if you were talking to other folks considering building brands that you go, hey, here's some lessons that I'm learning from my customers?
Yeah. I think kind of across the customer base is everyone needs to be a content creator. I think, obviously we work with like the big content creator brands, but people want to be, behind the scenes. Like consumers want to see, what's happening behind the scenes. So, I think that we're seeing obviously, TikTok is this like, it's not emerging, but like it is still early there where, the founder should be creating content. The team should be creating content. There's this opportunity to, organically grow. And I think that and to own an audience. And I think that there's like different platforms to do so. I, as a founder in the software space, I'm a content creator, for LinkedIn because that is where my customer is. I actually find that also brands are sharing and creating content for LinkedIn as well as a way to meet their retail customers. So retail buyers are on LinkedIn. And so, it is now becoming, a necessity. When you go to a retailer, they're asking you, how many followers do you have, as a founder, as a brand? Like, so building and creating that content is like critically important. And
for someone who isn't an influencer first, right? They're not a creator by default. How do you think about advising how they do that well? So let's just imagine a customer here. They're building, let's say, I don't know, mug brand, and they have a really excellent mug. For whatever reason, they've invented a really cool mug, but the founder and their team are mug manufacturing experts and don't have, the natural social ability or whatever it might be. Because you're talking about creating this content and some of it feels obvious in terms of like, we can show you how the mug is made, but that can only make you maybe one TikTok per month. What else can they be doing when they don't have that natural ability to be in front of a camera telling stories all the time?
So mugs feel pretty boring to me. But what is the unique insight that you have as a founder, and why are you building that business? So I was talking to, interviewing the founder of Routine, and it's this, product that serves a, postpartum woman. And so, as a, postpartum, mom herself, she's, experiencing these hormonal imbalances. So that is her unique insight. So she ends up really speaking to and creating a network. So she is an influencer herself now to, postpartum moms. So it's like being very targeted about what is your unique insight as a founder and the problem that you're solving, and leaning much more into the problem as like that's this like community that you're creating, and that's what's interesting to people. And I actually was at a conference yesterday that I heard this term called the Rise 2025 is going to be the year of the B2B creator. And what I initially read that as like, oh, I am in a B2B SaaS company and I'm a creator. No, it's not just that. It's every brand, instead of just creating for lifestyle. So like, this is what I do in my life and this is what I'm wearing. It's like, this is how I run my business. This is what behind
choices I make,
the choices that I make, how I think about it, why I went to this, how I'm pitching to Target. And you're starting to see that from these brands. And like, that is exciting to people. A lot of people want to be founders. Like, so many people are like, oh, I have this idea. It's really hard. So like, to go along for the ride like of a founder and of a team, and seeing like what behind the scenes it looks like to, film content and, like get into retail, have those meetings, like that is fun and interesting to people. And so that is, where I think that there's an opportunity.
No, it makes total sense. And I think the other thing I'm realizing though is for the brands that can't do it, it'll be because they don't have the why, which that's a brand that maybe is arbitraging on. They realize there's a lack of mugs, so we're fulfilling mugs. And then maybe that, they weren't going to work on social anyway, and they weren't going to be able to take advantage of this trend. But for 95% of founders, there is usually a pretty deep wire community that they can tap into. And that's, I think, a really good prompt for them to think about, if they're not natural in front of that camera, being more honest about all of their customers and why their customers are coming to them, why they're going to their customers, and kind of the narrative around why they exist might feel awkward because usually just trying to be like, my mug is awesome.
Yeah.
But there's something, the mug is holding coffee and we love coffee, and that can fold from it. So I love that prompt. Okay, this has been a fantastic conversation. Round of applause to you.
Thank you.